Hello, everyone. My name is Dawn. I was a second-generation farmer. I had a 36,000 square foot greenhouse near Didsbury, Alberta, and we did 20 acres of gardens. So just a little greenhouse and just a little garden, or actually it was a big greenhouse and a big garden. And so, yeah, that's who I am. I grew cucumbers, tomatoes, and peppers in the greenhouse mostly, some greens, some lettuces. And then in the field, I did potatoes, carrots, onions, beets. Honestly, you name it, I grew it in the field for field crops. And then I picked all my vegetables. Well, I didn't do it all. My team helped me. I had 7 guys from Mexico help me. But I picked all my vegetables. We picked them all and we packaged them all and we brought them to farmers markets and sold them. So that's a little bit of my history. So I was born into the greenhouse business. My parents had a 26,000 square foot greenhouse by Airdrie. They grew long English cucumbers, brought them to the warehouse, and they did a great job of that. So they'd pick them and they packaged them and they brought them right into town, into the warehouse. Yeah. They sold their greenhouse about 18 years ago. And then me and my ex-husband built ours. And so we were going to do the same thing. We were going to do long English cucumbers for the warehouse. It didn't work because margins on the farm are so tight. It didn't work very well. Our costs were higher than what we were selling our cucumbers for. And so that's when we started into farmers markets. And yeah, we started off with cucumbers and then eventually we moved to tomatoes, which was actually my signature crop. Tomatoes, I had a consultant that went around to all the greenhouses in Alberta. And he came to our greenhouse and he tried all the greenhouses right across the province. And he said that our tomatoes were the sweetest tomatoes he had ever had. And so, yeah, that was pretty cool. I think it's because we had salty water. We grew hydroponically. So hydroponics is where you give the plants water, you put the nutrients right into the water, and you give the plants the nutrients into the grow bags. And the plants would take the nutrients up, and then the wastewater would go, and then it would empty out into another dugout that we had on the property. And then from that dugout, the wastewater would actually go out onto to my field crops. And so I grew without pesticide unless certified organic product was used. So what that meant is I wasn't organic because I used fertilizer, and fertilizer is nutrients. This is one thing that people kind of get a little mixed up on, in that using fertilizer isn't a health concern. It's sustainability concern as far as organics goes, because plants need nutrients to grow, just like we need nutrients to grow. And so, yeah, we fed just fertilizer nutrients. But then when it came to herbicide would kill our greenhouse and our garden just like that. So that was never an option. No herbicide was ever used. And pesticides like fungicide and insecticide, we use the same methods as organics. So we covered, we sprayed our cabbages with an organic spray. And sometimes we use things in the greenhouse, but like for those aphids, we used Phytolades and Colmani, and sometimes we get ladybugs in, and we had a whole regiment for good bugs to eat the bad bugs in the greenhouse. And so,
do you remember the toilet paper wars of 2020? Are you worried about being prepared in an emergency? Are you tired of being a slave to the corporations we purchase from? It's time to take control. Become ungovernable. Take your food system into your own hands. Hi, I'm Dawn, a coach dedicated to helping you live like grandma used to. Self-reliant, resourceful, and prepared. Whether it's raising chickens, growing a garden, canning your own food, or even milking a cow, I'll teach you how to thrive and survive in the space you have, big or small. We can even potentially make some money off your homestead. Visit Dawn's Dirt today to book your free jumpstart call. Together, as a team, we can get you self-reliant and ungovernable. We, the people, have the power to take back control. Remember, if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. But if you teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. Let's build a better future and a community, one skill set at a time.
So I spend thousands of dollars every year on good bugs to eat the bad bugs and in the greenhouse. And so that's just a little bit of my history. Yeah. Outside in the field crops, my garden wasn't pretty. So, if you've ever seen your garden and you think, oh man, there's weeds in there, don't fret, because my garden at 20 acres, we had weeds all the time. And you want to know the biggest way I used, or the biggest trick in my pocket for weed control in my garden? The biggest thing I did in my garden was I actually used the lawnmower or the string trimmer. Sometimes those weeds would just get crazy out of control, and I would just take the lawnmower, push the lawnmower up the row, or ride out. We actually rode in a tractor sometimes, or took the weed whacker and just took the lawnmower to the weeds. And so sometimes if you need to do a lot of weeding in an area, yeah, just cut them down. It just knocks them out, and that's green manure back into your soil. Yeah, so that's a little bit about who I was and what I did and where I came from. So we want to talk about why it's important to grow food in the space you have. So on my new space here, I live in the country again, I built a little greenhouse, just an 8 by 16-foot greenhouse, and I grew a bunch of tomatoes in there, and it was super fun. I did it for fun this year, not on a big scale. You don't need a greenhouse. So even if you have the little garden beds right up to your quarter section, you can grow food for your family, and then you can grow food for your community as well. The first reason that we want to talk about growing a garden is cost savings. And so as we all know, groceries are going up in price. They are crazy expensive right now. Inflation has gone crazy. There's lots of reasons for that. But yeah, the cost on food is going up. So if you think about a package of seed costs just a couple of dollars. And the amount of food that you can get off that package of seeds is not a couple of dollars. It's many, many dollars. So if you planted, let's say lettuce, you planted a row of lettuce, you might have to plant a couple times that year. And we'll get back into lettuce later on in our talk as well. But if you plant some lettuce, you're going to pick from that lettuce several times. And that package of seed that's going to cost you $2 or $3 is going to turn into, if you were buying that lettuce at a store, it's going to turn into many, many dollars, $20, $30, $40, $50 worth of lettuce. And so you're going to save a lot of money. It's going to take a little bit of work, but a little work never hurt anybody. When my kids were little, I used to say, when we were in the candy aisle at a grocery store, they'd say, Mom, can I have some candy? And I'd look at them 2 and 3 years old, and I'd say, sure, you can have candy. Just go get a job. And so, yeah, a little hard work never hurt anybody, but you can save so much money if you just put some work in. And then there's tips and tricks to save on time and labor and things, because we've all got busy lives. So cost savings is the first reason. Healthier eating. Now, did you know that spinach is high in, I forget which vitamin it is. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's vitamin C. Please don't hold me to that, but I think it's vitamin C. But the longer spinach has been pulled or picked off and not got its roots in the soil or in whatever medium you've got, it starts to lose its vitamins. And the longer produce is off the plant, the less vitamins and the less nutrients it's going to have. So when we think about our current system, when we go to the grocery store, we've got all these vegetables and all these fruits, sitting there available to us. And the best case, this is the thing, the best case that those vegetables are a week old, because by the time they've been, and I know this because I was in the industry, we used to pick and then send to the warehouse, and then so those vegetables we picked from the farm, they would be then sent to the packaging house. From the packaging house, they'd go to a warehouse. From that warehouse, they might even go to another warehouse. From the warehouse, they would go to the grocery store. From the grocery store, their philosophy is it sits on the shelf until it rots or it sells. And so by the time you get that produce onto the shelf and into your home fridge or home counter, I don't put my tomatoes in the fridge, that produce is best case a week old. And so anything you grow in your backyard is going to be so much fresher and so much healthier for you and so much more nutrients. Yeah. So the third reason is food security. Everyone should know what I'm talking about. So we had the toilet paper wars of 2020, and people were worried about where their food was going to come from. During 2020, my phone was ringing off the hook. Hi, you have food, right? Yes, I have food. Hi, do you have food? Yes, I have food. And so people were so worried about where their food was going to come from. And so if we ever had it again, where our system, it just shows how fragile our system can be. That if within 2 or 3 days, we empty the shelves of meat and toilet paper and Lysol, and then we didn't get it back again for a few weeks. Well, can you imagine if borders shut down and things like that? What are we going to eat? And I'm not trying to be a doomsday, gloomsday prepper here, but I one of my fears moving off the farm is, what am I going to feed my kids if the system shuts down? And so I hope it never shuts down, but maybe it will. And I would rather be prepared myself. So yeah, so we want to make sure that we have our own food security in our own hands. Flavor and quality. So one of the things I used to say to my customers is when they buy my tomatoes is I'd say, if you're not happy, I'm not happy, let me know. And if they don't keep a week, like buy them, put them on your counter. And if they don't keep a week, if they go bad before the week's up, that's my problem, not your problem as a customer. I guaranteed my tomatoes a week on your counter. And if they didn't make it a week, it's because you got a bad tomato or there was something sideways with it, or they usually got a little nick or a mark in it. But yeah, so the quality of the produce that you're going to be pulling out of your gardens is much, much higher than what you would get in a grocery store. And the flavor, I used to have little kids, they would come to the booth and they would eat my tomatoes. They would just buy the handful. Sometimes I'd have samples of tomatoes and the kids would just come up. It is my favorite thing, actually, to see little kids just wanting my tomatoes because they were like candy. Yeah, I missed that part of my farm. The flavor and what you're going to pull out of your garden is so much different. It's just, if we're not trucking things back and forth across the country, I think no matter where you fall on the whole climate change deal, I think that there's things that we could be doing to be more responsible. And one of those things, probably is growing more things locally. And it's just better quality, better nutrients, better community, better for all of the above, and sustainability. The sixth thing would be self-sufficiency. We did talk about that with food security, but self-sufficiency, I guess back to food security, I needed to get, there was bureaucracy with my farms. So I needed to get Canada GAP certification on my farm to be able to sell to a grocery store, which is bureaucracy. And I don't do well with bureaucracy, so I never did it. And it would cost me $7,000 to sell $20,000 worth of produce on a wholesale level to one or two grocery stores. By that point, I was selling like hundreds of thousands of dollars at farmers markets. So I just said no to the bureaucracy and skipped that middle guy. Self-sufficiency, like we touched on too, knowing your food is in your backyard, knowing what you're going to eat, knowing that you have food. If you've got kids, that's my thing. What am I going to feed my babies if the grocery store shut down? Or even to that fact, I mean, we had COVID, and again, I'm not trying to pick on what you believe or what you don't believe about COVID. I have my strong beliefs on it. But if we actually did have a pandemic where people were dying in the streets, you might not want to leave your house. So what would you feed your family then? You'd want to do whatever you have in your yard and in your space. So self-sufficiency and food security kind of go hand in hand. Educational. I like number 7. So education. I had some clients last year and they brought their kids out to the garden with them and they gardened together. And there was the educational piece that they gardened as a family, but the kids learned. And I think this is so important. And I think it's something that we're missing in society right now, is knowing that a carrot grows in the ground, you pull it up and then, it's got some dirt on it. And then that's honestly the best carrot to eat, is the one that you grew yourself, planted, weeded, put some work in. So the carrot that you're eating right out of the garden, and the education portion behind that, knowing that you grew that vegetable, and that, if you can get your family involved, which again, number 7 and number 9 go together very well. I'll skip number 8 and go to number 9, and we'll go back to number 8. Number 9 says the family connection. So if you're doing this together as a family, weeding together, as you're weeding, you're talking to one another, building teamwork, in the garden, just all of the things. You're teaching your kids the step-by-steps. You're teaching them also that it doesn't always fit. Sometimes you might get a bug, or sometimes a plant might die. And there's so many lessons in gardening as far as education and family goes. So I'm all for gardening as a family. Number 8, kind of skipping back, is mental health. And so one thing that I was so thankful to experience this year was actually playing and having fun in my garden. See, before, when I had my farm, and I loved my farm, and it's felt like my arm has been ripped off in selling my farm. But one thing I was able to experience this year that I was never able to experience on my farm was just the mental health and the calmness and the funness of having a garden. See, when you have a 36,000 square foot greenhouse and 20 acres of garden, and you're working 7 days a week and you're trying to get these vegetables out to people, I actually sometimes didn't even always eat the vegetables I grew. Some years I'd have corn, and the only time I'd have corn in September was raw off the cob, because I sacrificed meals at my table to put food on others. And so this year, going and playing in the dirt and, digging things up and pruning my tomatoes, it was just for fun. It was just for me, instead of just push, stress. So mental health, gardening Well, and let's not take out of the fact that we're getting vitamin D when we're outside. I think vitamin D is so crucial to our health and bodies and systems. So, and then number 10 is probably my favorite. The reason why you should grow a garden is community. I was in Kelowna in September and at a retreat, and we ended up going and walking down to the lake. And as we were walking through this community, this urban community, there was a zucchini sitting on a transfer, like on an electrical box right in the middle of town. And I just looked at that zucchini and I thought, yes, that's what we need more of is community. And so it was just a zucchini, big zucchini sitting on an electrical box. And then when we came back through, that zucchini was gone. And it just was like, that's what we need more of. We need more people. There's always a joke, grow too much zucchini and then you put it in your neighbor's car. But can you imagine if you had too many tomatoes? Or can you imagine if you had too many carrots or too much lettuce or whatever it might be, and how you can work with your neighbors and give to your neighbors and give to the elderly down the street I don't think food banks sometimes take from just the average person. I donated a fair chunk to the food bank. Just, if there was someone in need, you have these extra vegetables that you could share with others and they can share with you. I heard a story one time where there was a whole apartment building and they each grew something. So one grew tomatoes and one grew basil and one grew some zucchini and one grew some onions or whatever it might be. And then they shared and swapped and they all made their own recipes and exchanged things and had like a little garden community club going from it. And so I really think if more of us grew gardens, we would have bigger and stronger and better communities. So that's my 10 reasons of why I think it's important to grow food in the space you have. So whether it's a backyard balcony or a quarter section, grow some vegetables for your community. I want to talk to you about 4 of the simplest vegetables to grow. And so I chose my top 4 vegetables that I think are the easiest. Different zones have different things. The 4 vegetables we're going to talk about are lettuce and greens, green beans, zucchini, and the 4th one would be tomatoes because tomatoes are probably my favorite vegetable to grow. So they're super easy to grow. So let's start with our lettuces and greens. So if you have lettuces, spinach, kale, arugula can be tricky because of bugs, but lettuce is one of your easiest greens to grow and easiest things to grow because they don't take a lot of nutrients to grow, nutrients in your soil. They're pretty hardy. They're very shade tolerant. They actually don't super love full sun. But having said that, I had my lettuce out in an open field, and as long as you water it enough, lettuce will grow, even in the hot days of summer. Lettuce is super easy, and greens. Now with your lettuce, spinach is an early crop. Spinach will sometimes bolt in the summer if it gets too hot, and so it is a little trickier in your hottest months to grow, but lettuce can grow right through the year. You might have to replant. So you're going to cut it off, and so you're going to harvest that, and you can leave this lettuce here, and you can cut it off, and you can make a salad out of it, and then it'll actually grow back. And so it'll grow back about 2 or 3 times for cut lettuce. A head lettuce, it's just one time. So lettuce needs a lot of water. It needs more and more water to grow. And so it just probably needed a bit more water would be my guess. So head lettuce, you would cut it once. Spinach, you can cut 2 or 3 times. Kale is a one crop per year plant. So you're going to plant it. And then you can just pick the leaves off and let it grow and grow and grow. So kale is one crop, but your lettuce and greens or lettuce and spinach are a couple of crops. And so, super, super easy to grow. One of my former clients from last year, she said that she wanted to grow a bit of a garden and she had never done anything before. And she said to me, I don't want to start with the hardest thing. And I love greens, but those are probably the hardest. And I said, nope, actually, that's where you should start. They're the easiest thing to grow. Even in the wintertime here, most of us are from Alberta. We We can even grow lettuce. I've got a grow tower. You can grow lettuce even in your living room right now. I've got some arugula growing in some pots. And so it's super easy. So spinach, sometimes I would actually plant my spinach in the fall and then it would start coming up again in the spring. It would overwinter sometimes. Sometimes you get lucky and it'll overwinter and sometimes you didn't. But yeah, in the real heat of summer, spinach can bolt so fast, right? What bolted means is that it basically goes to flower. It's going to push and it's going to go to seed. It's going to go to flower. And so that's what bolted means, is it overgrows. And sometimes it can get really bitter then too. Same thing with your lettuces. If you let them overgrow, they'll get sometimes bitter then as well. So baby lettuces, baby spinach, things like that, if you can catch it quick enough, is the best way to have it. Marigolds amongst your arugula, because my arugula flea beetle eats arugula. On the farm, I could only ever grow my arugula inside the greenhouse because the flea beetles kind of left it alone, but outside they just tortured it. Swiss chard is a nice green because it is kind of a one crop thing as well, and you can eat it when it's bigger or when it's smaller. I like the stem sauteed and then throw the leaves in on top. So yeah. So that's lettuce and greens, super easy to grow. Green beans, they're one of my favorites. So green and you're going to get a fair chunk out of a small space. So green beans they like it a bit warmer. So lettuce is a cool weather crop. Your greens are more cool weather crops. Back to kale. Sorry, one more point on kale. Kale can freeze. Oh, and did you know that your lettuce and spinach can freeze a little bit too? Like if you had -1, -2, they're okay like that. Kale can handle even a little bit colder than that. And so, yeah, your lettuce and greens are a cold weather crop. Green beans are a warm weather crop. And so you're going to want to put them in a warm place. You're going to want to make sure that you seed closer to your no freeze dates, because if you seed your lettuce and greens early, so if you seed your spinach early and it got a touch of frost, it's not the end of the world. If you seed your beans early and it gets a touch of frost, you're done. You got to reseed again. So you want to make sure that your beans don't get that frost, and you want to make sure they're in a warm area. And so beans will grow up and they'll grow up and you'll get, it depends on the year because every year is a little different, but you'll get, maybe a half a pound of beans per quarter pound, half a pound, pound of beans per plant. And so beans are just a really easy crop to grow. Now, when you buy beans in the grocery store, they are not good raw. They're kind of tough and not great. But when you have a fresh bean off of a fresh plant and when you pick them tender enough, you can eat them raw. So we grew in my greenhouse, we grew pole beans. So they were flat beans. So we grew these flat beans in the greenhouse and they were very tender. And yeah, we just ate them raw. And those pole beans were like 20 feet tall. If we let them, they'd go up and then they'd go down and we'd get a couple pickings of them. I grew them outside this year, and so they kind of just sprawled out over my planter boxes. But yeah, they were just as good, just as tender. Beans are best picked small and tender. Beans, yeah, I think beans are one of the easiest things to grow. And you can also store beans, right? So you can can them. I grew up on canned beans, or you could blanch them and freeze them. So yeah, green beans are pretty easy. And zucchini is one of the easier things to grow as well. So if you plant, it's kind of the running joke, if you've got a zucchini and you've got too much zucchini, you're kind of hiding it in people's front porches and things like that. So pickled beans are the best. Yeah. So yeah, zucchinis are really, really good to grow. Now I've done my zucchinis a couple of ways. So I've had up to, an acre of zucchini at a time. And what I would do is I would end up picking my zucchinis about a foot long and, not too big around, because I liked really tender, smaller zucchinis, and that's what sold best at the greenhouse. But sometimes we would have too many zucchinis. And so what we did on the farm was we would stop picking a row of zucchinis and let those zucchinis actually get really big. So you can use those in so many different ways. And there's so much of it, right? But what happens with those big zucchinis is the skins really set hard on them and they get really firm. And then they actually store almost like a squash. They wouldn't store as well as something like a spaghetti squash, but they would, they store for, a month or 2 or 3 after you pick it. And so that's a way to get your zucchini season to last a bit longer as well. So yeah, so zucchini, you can use them in so many different ways. So I love sauteed zucchini and onions in the summertime. but you can also freeze it and use it in your cakes and your different things like that. So one more little thing with the zucchini is zucchini and squash are very similar. They're in the same family. They're super easy to grow because because you can kind of set them and leave them. If you just water or weed around your zucchini plants, they get so prolific that eventually you don't have to weed them, and you kind of get harvest at the end of the season as well. Zucchinis, you can direct seed. If we're in Alberta anyway, zone 3, direct seed them, but if you can also transplant them. But I always did one per hill, because what happens if you do, my consultant in the greenhouse used to always say, less is more. And there's so much truth to that. It kind of goes against your thinking, but it's true. In a garden, less is more. And so you want your plant to have enough room to spread out. So if you've got 3 plants all bunched together, you have one beautiful plant like this, it's not going to compete. Whereas if you have 3 beautiful plants, they're just not going to get quite as big. So I would do one per hole or transplant them. And just getting to transplanting, you don't want to transplant big sprawling plants out. That's so hard on the plant. You want to do little plants. Do you fertilize zucchini? So here's the deal. Different plants need different nutrients to grow. So when you're growing in the soil, they're going to take what they need. Having said that, did you all eat today? Did you eat supper today? Did you eat lunch today? Did you get some nutrients out of your meals today? So the thing is, plants need nutrients to grow just as we need nutrients to grow. And so, yes, I used the wastewater out of my greenhouse and it went into a dugout. And yes, so they got the extra nutrients from the fertilizer in the water. So yes, I did fertilize. But if you have really good soil, if you've put some compost on your soil, the compost is nutrients. If you've done lots of those things, then you can, your plants can get nutrients that way as well. I'll jump into tomatoes here. Tomato pruning. So see how my tomato plants are long, and you can see the tomatoes and their stems and things like that. So you kind of get a picture there. So kind of keep that mental picture in your head. This is how I prune my tomato plants. Now, there is a difference between indeterminate and determinate tomato plants. So indeterminate means they are a little shorter. Sometimes they bush out a bit more. I have always pruned them. I've grown them in the greenhouse too. Prune them the same way that I would prune an indeterminate plant. An indeterminate plant would grow as long as you want. And so sometimes I would get my tomato plants in January, and I would pick and have my tomato plants right through to the next December. So they'd be almost a year old when I was done with them. And they would be 75 feet tall by the time I was done with them. So when you have your tomato plant, it's going to start down here, okay? What you're going to do is you're going to let that tomato plant grow up. So this is your grow point. Okay, so your tomato plant grows up. And so on a tomato plant, you'll have a leaf. Okay, so this is a leaf. And then the next one, you'll have a sucker. And what a sucker is it's going to have many leaves. It's almost like another tomato plant would grow. Okay, so that's a sucker. And then you're going to have a leaf. And then you're going to have another sucker. Okay, so that's your tomato plant growing up. And then you always have your grow point. Your grow point always has leaves up here. So there's leaves, up here like that. Okay. So that's your grow point. That's your main stem. So you have more flowers on your suckers like that. But what we did in our greenhouse is we actually pull out all of our suckers. So if there was a sucker, we pulled it out. So we have now a stem only with 0 suckers. One main stem, 0 suckers. And you can tell a sucker by it's just frillier, whereas a leaf is just a leaf. It takes some training to do that, but once you kind of get it, you get it. And so suckers and leaves. So you leave your leaves and you leave your flowers. And then your flowers are pollinate. You never have to prune your flowers off at the beginning. If we were growing cucumbers, that's different. You want to take your bottom set of cucumbers off. But on a tomato plant, you can start right away. So you leave your flowers come, you leave your leaves come. And then how we got the vine was in my greenhouse, we only ever had 15 leaves, 12 to 15 leaves. For a backyard garden, I would do 15. You leave all your flowers and 15 leaves. And what you do is you start at the bottom and you de-leaf. And I took about 2 or 3 leaves off my plants every week. Now, my plants were in peak production because they were getting the exact nutrients that they wanted. They got exactly what they needed. And so I had really strong, healthy plants. But if you always, every week, go from the top of your plant, or every 10 days, go from the top of your plant and count down to 15, and then just strip everything underneath that. Not the tomatoes, not the flowers, and not the tomatoes. What you're doing is you're opening up your tomato plant to the sunshine. You're opening it up to the sunshine, and the sun helps them ripen. When you've got green tomatoes, put them in the sunshine and they'll ripen a bit faster. Same thing here. We're ripening them a bit faster here because we're opening it up to the sunshine. And the other thing that this is doing is it's keeping your tomato plant stressed right out. So my plants were stressed out all the time. And when a tomato plant is stressed out, it's producing fruit, which is seed. Like it thinks it's dying, so it wants to produce seed to keep going. And so that's what it's doing, is it's producing seed to kind of keep going. So your plants are stressed out. And that's going to help your tomatoes turn riper and redder faster. So what we did was we grew our tomatoes up a string. And eventually what we did was we had a wire at the top that we hung our strings on with extra string up there. And then we grew our tomato plant down. So I have done indeterminate, determinate. You can grow them all the same way. My mom, when we first started the greenhouse, she actually grew bedding out plants. And so she'd have sometimes, that's how I actually got into tomatoes. She would give us some leftover plants, and we planted those, and then we got tomatoes out of them. So they were indeterminate, just garden varieties. And I pruned them with this method, and it worked, and we got more production. So I want to talk first about fruit pruning. So when you have baby tomatoes, so little grape tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, all of those little varieties, you never fruit prune. You just let it all buck. You let them all come. Beefsteak, we prune back to 3. So we would actually fruit prune at the flower stage. So we had a cluster of tomatoes. We'd turn 1, 2, 3. Tomato on the vine, we prune to either 4 or sometimes 5. Now, the reason you do that with a big tomato is actually it takes all the nutrients, and if you take these last couple flowers out, then it's putting all of its nutrients into this cluster of tomatoes. So that's for fruit pruning. And you do it at the flower stage. You don't wait till they're grown. It's at the flower stage that you fruit prune them. Another little trick with tomatoes is if you do accidentally break a tomato plant, they're like weeds. And so you can just take tape and black electrical tape and tape it up. So as long as it's not broke like this is pretty hard to tape together. But if it's broke like this, even with a little bit of a string or something still there, you can black tape that bad boy back up and it'll go again. So black tape is your friend, electrical tape. But I've had clients this year where they had south-facing decks, and they could just string their tomatoes up onto their deck and grow them with this method. I just think this method pushes those plants a little bit harder. So I just want to finish up tonight and say thank you so much for coming out. Really appreciate you. And thanks so much for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it.